Hi everyone, welcome to Social Astrology channel. I am Sam. Today is October 13, 2023, 1:19 p.m. Eastern Time. In this video, I want to talk about a brief history of astrology and also tell you how can we use astrology today. Arguably, astrology is one of the oldest science, or perhaps the oldest science in the world. But the term science, I'm not using it with its modern definition. What I mean is a systematic web of knowledge. In the past, for quite some time, there was no distinction between astronomy and astrology. Almost every astronomer practiced astrology and vice versa. And they were very skilled in mathematics also. And actually, I would argue that perhaps the interest in mathematics was largely due to interest in astronomy, because they needed a very complex mathematical system in order to make predictions about the position of the stars in the future. And the interest in astronomy was actually because of astrology. Otherwise, why would people 4,000 years ago even care about astronomy? And they cared about astronomy because they were interested about the things that would happen on Earth for them, which is the astrological part of it. Astrology started around 4,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, which falls in today modern Iraq, Iran, southern Turkey, and eastern Syria. For quite some time, they were looking at the sky and then take a note of the planetary position and record them on clay tablets, and also recorded the major events that happen on Earth. And after a while, they actually ended up with a huge database of around 50,000 clay tablets. Some of them have survived today, and we have them. And they recorded the planetary alignment and the major event that followed after that alignment. And when they studied those, after a while, they came up with some patterns. They noticed that there are some consistent patterns that, for instance, whenever this is just an example, whenever there's an eclipse in Scorpio, there's going to be an earthquake a few months later or a few weeks later, or when certain alignments happen, king dies, or there's a drought and things like that. So this was how astrology was born, by discovering these patterns of what's happening in the sky and what's happening in their life. And it is, I should also mention that early astrologers didn't really believe in cause and effect. They didn't believe that it was true cause and effect that astrology worked. They didn't believe that the planets actually cause anything for them. What they believed was that they saw the planets as omens that sort of signal something for them. So they saw it more like a correlation rather than a cause and effect situation. So the sentence so above, so below actually captures their understanding of astrology. Gradually, after 2,000 years, they ended up creating a very complex system of astrology. And interestingly, that is almost exactly the same type of astrology we use today. It is called horoscopic astrology. And what they did, actually, they combined the astrology that was practiced in Mesopotamia with the astrology that was practiced in Egypt, because in Egypt they also had some sort of astrology, but it was quite different with the ones in Mesopotamia. So as I said earlier, they needed very complex mathematical skills in order to do their predictions about the planetary position in advance. So they came up with something we call today ephemeris in English, which is actually basically tables of planetary position in the future. For instance, let me show you an ephemeris that I have. This is a modern version of an ephemeris. It shows the planetary alignment from 1950 to 2050. So for instance, right now, if I want to know where is going to be the position of a star in July 2045, I don't know if you can see, I just opened this page, it shows the planetary alignment there. For instance, here you can see the planets like Mars, Mercury, everything. And then in these tables they show, for instance, let me tell you, the position of, let's say, Mercury in July 2nd, 2045 is going to be 5 degree 45 minutes of Leo. So today this is cool, but in the past that was impressive that they could actually make these tables. And the earliest table that they make of these ephemeris, it was around 400 BC, so around 2,400 years ago, could actually make these tables. And they could, they would know that when Mercury is going to be, I don't know, 100 years from now, which was very impressive. And over time they kept writing these tables. And this is an example of, this is actually a table wrote by Khwarazmi, but this is a Latin translation. They translated in the past, I don't know which year they translated it, probably in medieval time. They translated Khwarazmi's Zij table. In Persian, they called these ephemeris Zij, and they were actually very good at making Zij. Like many famous Zij were actually made in Iran. Like people like Khwarazmi, Jamshid, Qiyasuddin Kashi, Khayyam, they all like wrote Zij. But of course today, like, they made some errors because they didn't have the tools that we have today, and they would revise each other. It was very interesting. And especially Sasanian, during the Sasanian area, like they were actually they wrote many good Zij, and they were very good at writing Zij. And I believe they called it Shah Zij during Sasanian, because the Zij, they would be like named after the king or the emperor who commissioned those astronomers or astrologers to make these tables, planetary tables. I also forgot to mention that Khwarazmi was actually the mathematician who invented algorithm, and they actually used algorithm for these table, like Zij table. Although in the past they also made the tables, but they used other techniques. But algorithm was really helpful for them to make more precise Zij tables or ephemeris. So that probably support my argument earlier that it was perhaps through interest in astronomy that they were motivated to come up with better mathematical skills. Or now let's look at how we can use astrology, or what astrology is good for, because people ask me that question. One way that astrology can help us is by helping us to know ourselves better, like psychologically, or to know our talents better. So by studying your natal chart, you can discover some aspect of your personality that you had overlooked. You can see where certain problems would have come to you in your life. You can also discover some talents that you had that you didn't know because you didn't invest in it. You can see the potentials, and then you can make a decision that you, for instance, if your chart shows that you are very talented in arts or music and you haven't ever tried it out, then that's a good indication that go ahead and learn some music, because maybe you got some talents there, and then you can discover the hidden talents that you had, or your children even better, I would say. The thing about astrology that you should know is that almost every planet, not almost, like every planet and every sign, they have both positive and negative aspects, because every planet has certain archetypes, and every sign also has certain qualities, but they're like combination of both negative and positive. And many astrologers believe that these energies would manifest in your life one way or another. So if they're not manifested positively, they are going to be manifested negatively. So if you know like which energies are strong in your chart, then you can consciously choose to activate or engage with certain activities that would either positively or at least neutral use of that energy, so the negative side doesn't manifest. Let me give you an example. For instance, let's say somebody has very prominent Mars in their chart. This person, if they know, I mean, sometimes it happens that they might just do it naturally, like, by chance. They just be interested in the sport, do a sport, which is great. But for some reason, that person hasn't gone to sports, and then they have very strong Mars. So that Mars energy is there, but it's not used in a more productive or at least neutral way. So what happens that this Mars can create a lot of fight in their life. So they might be fighting with people in their life, or they could actually be recipient of a lot of violence from others. So once they discover this, then they can consciously choose to start like doing some sports, like especially competitive sports like boxing or martial arts, stuff like that. And so those Mars energy is actually used more productively, which helps to lower the negative side, which is getting into fights or arguments with other people. Also, for instance, if you have Neptune strong in your chart, it's best if you engage in arts or some charity work or some spiritual practice or creative writing, poetry, things like that. Because if you don't, because these are like positive sides of Neptune, if you don't do this, then the negative side might show up in your life. And then the negative side of Neptune is confusion, deception, fogginess, illusion. Also could be addiction, things like that. So like for instance, if you look at somebody with strong Neptune, and then you see the person is suffering from addiction, so one way to help them is to suggest that they should start doing first of all like some maybe meditations, stuff like that, because Neptune is very good with this stuff. And also arts, for instance, that engaging in arts or charity, they can actually help the person to sort of show or manifest that Neptune energy in a more positive way. And I believe that's especially important for children. So when for parents to use astrology to direct their children, like for instance, not every child is going to be an athlete. It's not even good for them necessarily, and not arts is not good for every children. So when you have these charts, you can see that which area your child has potential. So actually you use that energy to help the child to manifest those energy in a positive and productive way rather than in a destructive way. For instance, a very strong Mars in a child, if you don't let them to do sports, then they end up being hyperactive, perhaps because that pent-up energy remains in them. The second use of astrology is to know about the future in advance. Although there are a couple of points I have to mention. One is that, first of all, most astrologers, they don't claim that they can predict the exact event in the future for you. They can't tell you that, on this day you are going to be robbed exactly, or you're gonna break your finger, or like most astrologers today, at least, they don't make those claims. However, what they can tell you is that the energies that could create certain situation for you, or the energies that are supportive for certain events to manifest in your life, or the energies that actually are not supportive. So once you can actually sort of like plan your future better. Like think of it like an analogy for that would be like a weather forecast. Okay, for instance, if they say there's going to be thunderstorm tomorrow or sunny tomorrow, like you can make adjustment so you can use your time better. If it's going to be rainy tomorrow, it's better not to go to the beach and use your time at home like studying. Or if it's going to be a gorgeous day, and then the rest of the week is going to be rainy. So it's better that you plan that, okay, on this day I'm going hiking, and then for the rest of the week I would just stay home, read books, etc. So like astrologers can tell you about the future trends, like future energies, so you can make better use of them. For instance, sometimes the planetary alignment is very supportive for career, so that is not a good time to plan your trip. It's better to use your energy to for job related topics. Vice versa, sometimes the energies are very supportive just for relaxing. They're not very supportive for working hard. If you choose to, for instance, do a lot of hard work and for your career on that day, it may not be as productive. So it's better if your time is flexible, if you could make adjustment. So it's better to adjust it according to the astrological weather, so to speak. And the other thing about these predictive astrology is that sometimes you can escape it, but knowing what's going on is actually helps you to stop panicking. For instance, if there is a Saturn transit in your 12th house, this is a time for most people that it's a very downtime. They're sort of like withdrawn from the society. They want to be left alone. They're in a limbo. They can be confused. They can feel a little bit depressed. But like if you don't know astrology, you may panic that, oh, what's wrong with me? And I don't know, they may go to doctor and put them on antidepressant and things like that. But if you know astrology, you know that, okay, this is actually normal. This is supposed to be. This is the time that I have to be withdrawn from the world as much as I can and meditate or reflect or, rest more or, contemplate about my life, things like that. And so knowing what is happening in your life through like astrological, like predictive astrology, it actually helps you, to also relax, not panic, and know that this is supposed to happen. And also knowing like about the future or predictive astrology helps you to govern yourself accordingly. For instance, if Saturn is in your 10th house, which is the house of career, this is not a good time to be risk-taking, to be revolutionary, to be even innovative. That is actually a best time. That time you actually have to be very conservative in your job, at least. You have to follow the rules. You should not, do cut corners. You have to just, do whatever you're told. Don't argue. Don't try to innovate. Don't try to be, great in your job. Just be very humble, very down to earth, and very conscientiousness. However, if you don't do that, you actually can end up being in trouble. You can actually even lose your job because the energy is not supportive for bring a radical change in your job at that time. However, when Uranus is transiting through your 10th house, it's actually the opposite. If you try to be conservative, you may actually get fired because at that time the energies are supportive of innovation, of even radical movements, even being a little bit rebellious. So when Uranus is transiting your 10th house, it's best to actually create a change in your job. Like if you're thinking about even changing your job, change your job when Uranus is transiting your 10th house. Either change it or make radical reforms in whatever you're doing. If you don't, then these energies would come at you from outside, and you may just get fired because Uranus demands radical, sudden, unexpected change, or also it demands an innovation and creativity and things like that. So again, knowing what is happening in your chart according to the transits or other timing techniques, it can help you to govern yourself accordingly, according to the energy that are happening in the sky for you. There is another timing technique, because these ones I was talking to about, they were like looking at a transit, but then there are other timing techniques that I don't want to get into because they're extremely complex. But but I just want to mention that there are some other timing techniques that they don't just look at the day to day, what is happening to you. They look at a very longer phase in your life. Like sometimes that phase can be as long as 30 years or as short as 8 years. It's called zodiacal releasing. It's one of those ancient techniques that has been recently rediscovered through translation of ancient text. So like for instance, you see, like for instance, according to the zodiacal releasing, sometimes you can prosper better in your career or in your love life or in your health than other time. And again, this time is nothing to do with the planets. It's something else which I don't want to get into. But like, just know that, for instance, if you know that right now you are in the peak of your career, like you have a 12 years window to prosper in your career. So once you know that, then you can put all your concentration on that, so you can build your career. But when you know that this is not the peak time for you, then actually can help you not to feel discouraged. Know that, okay, my time hasn't come yet. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have any success. It just means the best has not come yet. So you have to wait a few more years in order to get into the phase of like peak of your career, and then you can flourish better. So that's also helpful to know. Another very interesting use of astrology is the astrology of relationship. In this type of astrology, the astrologer would compare your natal chart with the natal chart of your partner or anybody. It doesn't have to be romantic partner. It could be a family member, friends, even your boss, colleagues, anybody. And then they compare these two natal charts, and then they can say what kind of interactions you two people can have together. Because probably I've already noticed that you like some people better than other people with no reason, and the reason actually is in your natal charts. For instance, you probably have noticed that there are certain people that you don't really understand them, and they're talking like you can't follow their logic. You don't even know what they're talking about. You can't even communicate very well with them. You always misunderstand them, or they always misunderstand you, and you are not even interested in talking to certain people. And then there are other people that you can't stop talking. You just always, talk to each other. Sometimes before you even say something, they already guess what you're going to say. Sometimes you actually have some telepathic communication with certain individuals. And then there are certain other people that you do talk to them, you are interested talking to them, but you end up like having a lot of arguments with them, or you always feel put down by their words, or these are like we have different interactions. That is down to the placement of your Mercuries, or the aspects that your Mercuries are making with each other. If the Mercuries are in aversion to one another, meaning they're not making major aspects to each other, that is a person that you're not even interested in talking to them. You probably don't even talk to them. Or if you do, you can't, keep following them. You just, stop, losing interest in what they say, or you don't even understand what they're talking about. If, for instance, the other person's Mercury makes a 90-degree aspect to your Mercury, these are the people you probably are interested talking to them. You do understand them. However, you end up like arguing with them a lot. But people that make they call trine or sextile aspect to your Mercury, which are 60 degrees or 120 degrees, these are called like easy aspects or soft aspects. These aspects, they're very harmonious. Like you enjoy talking to that person, you always have topics to talk about, you understand each other very well, you're always on the same page. And so it comes down to the Mercuries that you have. In like romantic relationship, Venus, like the aspect Venus and Mars make together are very important. That you feel like physically attracted to somebody, you you think they're physically attractive. This is when like Mercury and Venus, they're either conjunct, or they make some easy aspects, perhaps even hard aspects, I'm not sure. Although with the hard aspect, there's always sort of like maybe a negative side to it too, but like especially easy aspects or conjunction, you feel very attracted to that person, you feel them physically appealing. Also, like especially when you want to live with somebody, so for instance for marriage, or even like having a housemate or roommate, the moons should be compatible, because the moon are, first of all, your emotional personality. Second of all, it's your rhythm, your daily rhythm. If your moons are not harmonious, you cannot really peacefully live together under one roof. You may really love each other, or be attracted to each other, or even understand each other very well because of your Mercury. Like your Mercuries could be very harmonious, so you can enjoy talking to that person. But if your moon are not harmonious, then living together could be challenging. So maybe those people would be people that you keep them as friends rather than marrying them, sort of thing. Another very cool and interesting use of astrology is called astrocartography, which what it does, it actually tells you which geography on Earth creates certain energies for you, because we experience life in different geographies quite differently, so depending on our natal chart. So what they do, they superimpose your natal chart over the map of the world, and they can see, for instance, your Mercury line goes over New York City, for instance. Your moon line goes over Egypt, for instance. Like when you go to those geographies, you're under the influence of those planets that you have in your natal chart. So sometimes some people can use this type of astrology in order to either like see where they can migrate, or they can go for a trip, or for vacation, where they're going to have a pleasant time. If for instance Venus is going through, I don't know, London would be very pleasant for them. But if like their Mars is going through New York, then New York would be quite unpleasant for them. Things could happen in New York that they may not really enjoy. Also, like some people, for instance, could be successful in business in certain area or certain geographies in the world than the other. For instance, if you keep starting a business and your business fail, maybe you need to change your place. You can have astrologer who knows astrocartography to tell you which city you should move in to start your business. That city, like I have to tell you this, that city is not a magical place. It doesn't mean everything is going to go well for you, because depending on other planets that are also present around that geography, you could end up, like for instance, you can move to that city, like I don't know, Toronto, and that could be very great for business, but actually that may not be great for your relationship or your home life. Like in your home life, you might feel very isolated, because for instance Saturn would be on your IC, for instance. But for business, your business might flourish. So just keep that in mind, that there's no perfect place that you can go that everything would fall into place, but you can pick and choose that which area of my life needs more attention, and is there any geography on Earth that I can move into in order to improve that area of my life. Although I should say, I read somewhere, or I heard actually somewhere, that sometimes you don't really have to physically move into that place. If you cannot move it, I mean, it's best to move there. If you cannot, sometimes you can just incorporate. Like for instance, I don't know, your Neptune falls in India, for instance. So it could help if you listen to Indian music, for instance, or use like Indian food or things like that, like bringing that energy, or even like having online contact with somebody that lives or is from that certain area. It actually can activate that energy in your life. Another use of astrology, which I talked about in other videos, is called electional astrology, which is finding auspicious time to begin a project. So you can ask astrologer to look into the future and find a good date for you and a good time to start certain project in order to have, certain quality. The idea is that anything that has a definite beginning in time has a birth chart. So you can in advance choose the birth chart of your business, or the birth chart of your marriage, or the birth chart of writing a book, or whatever it is you want to do. You choose it in advance and say, okay, if I start this project at this time, at this date, then these planets are going to be in these houses, in these signs, these aspects, and this is going to be the birth chart of my project. And the energies would, sort of locked into that birth chart, and it remains in that project for you. The other use is finding your birth time, which is called rectification, chart rectification. If you don't know the exact time of your birth, you can ask an astrologer to do a birth time rectification for you. What they do, they go over the major events for you in your life. For instance, when you got married, when you had your first kid, when you graduated, when you migrated, when you had a surgery, things like that, like important things that happened in your life. They take the date of those, and then they go over your chart, and then they can do a reverse engineering and find out what time you were born, because sometimes it matters a great deal if you were born, I don't know, like 7:20 or 7:25. Like that 5 minutes difference can actually make a huge difference in either the timing of the events, like your marriage could be changed by 3 years, for instance, if you were born like 5 minutes earlier. And sometimes certain events wouldn't even happen to you if you were born a little bit, sooner or later. So it is very important whenever you want to have a natal analysis to have your exact birth time. If you're not sure, because many people, they just roughly they know they were born around noon, or they were born like at 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. whatever. Especially with the round hours is kind of tricky because people tend to round them, so if you're not sure about the minute that you were born, it's better, before doing any other chart analysis, order a birth time rectification in order to get the exact minute of your birth. And the other use of astrology we talked about in previous videos is horary astrology, which is asking a question. This is actually, I could say, other than the mundane astrology, is the only type of astrology perhaps that you don't really even need to know the time of your birth or even the date of your birth. Okay, this is actually could be very helpful for people who have no idea when they were born, and actually it was developed by those astrologers during medieval time that they didn't have their birth time. They sort of invented this to sort of compensate for that. Because it's not based on your natal chart, it's actually based on the chart of the sky at the exact moment that you are asking that question. So it's called horary astrology. So if you have a specific question, and the question could be about anything, it doesn't have to be even about astrology. You could even ask questions like, where is my missing cat? Or things like that. You ask an astrologer, and then the astrologer would cast a chart for that moment that they receive your question. They look at the chart and they can answer your question. If you have any horary astrology question, feel free to write in the comments for me. I would probably answer them. There are certain conditions they have to have for astrology. I would write them in the comments about the instruction of what type of questions are appropriate to ask, or what type of questions are not. And I'll do my best to answer your question. If you have other questions, feel free to ask. If you don't know, if you want to know how to calculate your natal chart, feel free to ask. So I hope this video was helpful, and have a great time. Bye for now.